Welcome to You Rise Me Up, a podcast about Asian Europeans from all walks of life. I'm your host, Ching, a German-born Chinese. Today with me, Kexin Ye, a fellow German-born Chinese. Kexin is a technology consultant who is also working on her own startup. Her entrepreneurial journey began early as she supported her father and younger brother through various jobs and ventures while growing up without a mother. She also gained recognition as a participant on The Apprentice, One Championship Edition, which aired in 2021 and is available on Netflix. Kex and I met through a common friend here in Berlin. Thank you, Kex, for taking the time to take part in the podcast.
Hi, Jing. I'm super happy to be here.
So, Kex, when we first met through a common friend, there are actually a couple of things that surprised me about you because our friend Lin, he introduced us because I actually told him that even though there are a lot of Asians in Berlin, like a lot of them are Vietnamese, and after moving here, I basically got adopted by the Vietnamese community, but I still don't have a lot of German-born Chinese friends. And then he was like, oh, I know this girl called Kex. Do you want me to introduce you to her? And I was like, sure, I would love to meet her. And he mentioned that you were born in Berlin. So I thought like, oh, her life must have been very different from mine. She must have had a lot of Asian friends growing up and so on because Berlin is the capital. There are a lot of Asians here. But then when I met you, so the things that surprised me were like, first, I thought that your name was actually Kexin, but then you told me that everyone calls you Kexin or Kex, which confused me. And I was wondering if you ever like reflected on that because you also know, right, that Kexin is actually the German version of Kexin, which is the Chinese pronunciation. And the second thing was that you told me that you also didn't have a lot of Asian friends growing up because you grew up in West Berlin and also that you grew up without a mom. And then, we ended up in this overseas Vietnamese meetup somehow that we crashed and we never got to talk about that. But I'm actually really curious about your story, how you grew up and how you think and reflect on these things.
Okay, so first, the question about my name or if I ever had an identity crisis because of the way my name is pronounced. I actually did not have an identity crisis or I was never confused by it because funnily enough, my dad actually pronounced my name like that. He always said Kexin in German, basically. Of course, when he called me my Cantonese name, it's a bit different. Then he would call me Yang Yang, which is the nickname for my Cantonese name because my dad is Cantonese and not Mandarin, actually. And to be honest, I also have to say Kexin is already hard enough for German people to pronounce. I don't know if they would have been able to pronounce Kexin.
Do you know why your dad also pronounced it as Kexin? Does your dad speak Mandarin?
Yes, he does speak Mandarin, but he is way, way better in Cantonese. I think he just wanted to integrate me into German society, I guess, because he also came here nearly, that's why. My brother actually got a European name. He got a Western name. He's called Kent, like a Barbie's boyfriend.
Yeah.
Clark Kent Superman. Yeah, but I just got the German pronunciation of my Chinese name, I guess.
But why? Was it your dad who gave you that name actually or someone else?
Yeah, it was my dad. But it's fine. I think the only trauma I have from my name is that everyone always thought it's a typo. So they always thought it's actually Kevin instead of Kexin. So every single time when I was like in a new class or the teacher was reading out my name, they always said Kevin.
Yeah.
And I was so embarrassed because first of all, I'm a girl. I'm not a Kevin. I'm not a guy. And second of all, it's so weird to raise your hand and then say, it's Kexin. It's Kevin.
Oh my God. I also had that struggle, but they didn't think it was a mispronunciation. They just couldn't pronounce it. It was so annoying. But it doesn't help that my name is also misspelled. I am actually like Qing Qing, and it confuses so many people. And I actually also didn't realize that I was constantly mispronouncing my name until my friend pointed it out at a party. She was like, hey, Qing, why do you keep mispronouncing your name? But I'm just so used to like just saying, hey, I'm Qing.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah. But anyways, Kex, how did you actually grow up? Like, what was your experience like?
I think maybe one thing that I've left out during our initial introduction of each other is that I actually grew up in a small village or like a small town before I moved to Berlin. And that small town was Gransee. It's Brandenburg, which is the big piece of land of nothingness around Berlin. And to be honest, I think the majority of the population there was white. I think 90% white or so. So I did not really grow up internationally the first years of my life. I think I moved to Berlin when I was 10 or 11. But before that, it was very white. So therefore, I had to explain some things, why I'm eating certain things, or why the cooking of my family smelled different than their cooking, or why my eyes look differently, and things like that. I think as a child, you don't really realize that there's a bad intention behind it because, I mean, kids also don't know better usually, or they just get taught by parents. But growing up, you kind of realize, wait, that was actually hurtful. And then when I was 10, then my father, my brother, and I, we moved to Berlin. And the story was that we moved to Berlin in the middle of a school year. I think it was like September or October. So we were actually too late to be registered to a school. But there was an international school just 10 minutes away from our apartment in Berlin. And my father literally went to the principal and he begged him to take me as a student. He was like, I know I'm late for this, but I just got out of a divorce and I just moved here with my 2 kids and I'm a single dad and I don't know how to manage everything. And I know I'm late for the school year, but just please take my kid basically and get them into your school. And the principal was so, so nice. His name was literally Mr. Herz, which is Mr. Heart. And yeah, he said, you know what? I will take your daughter if she's able to learn English in 2 months because it was an international school and you usually had to do like an English test in order to be accepted into the school. But I never had English before. So I had 2 months time to learn English. And that was torture because you know how Chinese parents are. They give you a dictionary and they put you into the toilet and they will not let you out until you learn a couple of pages of the dictionary, basically. But yeah, that was how my life was for the next 2 months then. And everything worked out and I got accepted.
Wow. Wait, so you actually learned how to speak English good enough to attend that international school in 2 months?
Basically, of course, I had some grammar issues and pronunciation issues and so on, but I think it was good enough for them to see, okay, she's making an effort. It's enough for her to join.
I see. And then what was that experience like for you to go to that international school compared to your experience in Gransee?
It was definitely so, so different because there were so, so many people from different cultures. I have to say, not that many Asians, surprisingly, because now that's a full circle moment because I grew up in West Berlin and the majority of Asians and Vietnamese are in East Berlin, but the international school was in West Berlin. So I had different kinds of nationalities and different kinds of international friends, but I felt extremely welcome, to be honest. Because, oh, I actually remember that one moment in Gransee, we're in elementary school in PE class, where we were supposed to hold each other's hands and form a circle. And I remember that the kids next to me, they didn't want to touch my hand because I'm Asian. They literally put their sleeves over their hands before they touched my hands. But I had that same situation. I don't know why in German PE classes, they always want the students to hold hands and form a circle. But I literally had that same moment in Berlin as well. And I remember being scared that people would not want to hold my hand, but they just held my hand openly, like without hesitation. And I really remember that as like a super key moment for my childhood. So that healed me, to be honest, that moment.
But did that change how you perceived yourself or how you felt about yourself? Because obviously, as a kid, if someone doesn't want to hold your hand and so on, it's quite hurtful. But then realizing, oh, I moved to Berlin and people here are treating me differently, did that change things?
Yes, definitely. I think it made me a lot more comfortable and also confident in the person that I am. And I felt more free to express myself and to just be the person that I am and to explore myself also. I think if I would have stayed in Gransee, at some point I would have probably just developed social anxiety or something like that. I would just not want to go out, I guess, because I would feel so alienated. But no, everything was so, so welcoming in Berlin. So I was very lucky with that.
And what was it like for you to grow up without a mom?
Are you a firstborn daughter, actually, in the family?
I'm the first daughter, so I have an older brother, but I'm the first daughter.
Yeah, yeah. So I think you know what I mean, right? With being the first
Yeah.
or the oldest daughter in a Chinese household. I mean, you kind of have to take on every responsibility. So you're the sister and the mom, and at the same time, but not really the daughter. So you just basically were taught to behave and to manage everything as a kid, and to take care of your brother, and to not stress out my dad because he was already stressed out enough, and blah blah blah, things like that.
What did your dad actually do to earn money and what was your relationship with him? Obviously, when you were younger, you probably didn't have much time to develop much of a deep relationship with him as he was always working. But how did that relationship change later on?
My dad chose a very typical career path for Chinese parents. He had a Chinese restaurant. So that means the working hours in restaurants are just different. He starts his day at 10 or 11. So that was basically the time where I was in school already. And he finished his work day maybe around 10 or 11 in the evening, where I was already sleeping. So that's why I didn't really see him a lot. We were always just missing out on each other's, even though we were living in the same place, in the same apartment. We never really saw each other's. And I mean, the relationship back then was a lot more pragmatic. It was always just behave, take care of your brother, and just be good in school, blah, 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 things like that. But then later on, when I was also more mature, I was more able to talk to him on a deeper level, more about life, about his past, about the divorce, how he saw everything, and so on. It developed definitely a lot better. It felt always a bit more like a partnership, I guess, with him, but more like on a basis of two people that are platonically involved with each other and just like working together and just keeping the peace. And now it feels more like a family, more like a relative, more like my actual dad.
And did you also have to help in the restaurant?
No, that actually not, because my dad never wanted me to ever work in the restaurant industry, to be honest. He always felt like it was a super hard job and working so many hours. He is aware of the fact that he missed out on a lot of things that happened with his kids or for his kids. He never was able to join any school activities or school performances or whatever. He missed out on a lot, and he didn't want the same for me, for my kids.
And how did he then react to the fact that you actually took on a lot of part-time jobs and different things to actually try to help him? How did he react to that?
To be honest, I think my dad and I have always had a little bit back then a more of a distant relationship. So I never really even told him about jobs that I just took. I guess he maybe just knew because I just stopped having to ask for money for certain things. But I mean, I would like to think that he's, of course, supportive of me being independent and just working and gaining some experience.
Did you ever find out why your mom actually left in the first place?
I found out way, way, way later on. I think I found out around 25 or so. And I mean, I'm now 30 and there are still new informations that are coming out. To be honest, I made peace with that at some point because I remember that when I was younger or when I was a teenager, of course, I wanted to know every single detail. I would literally scoop through the documents of my dad and read through court documents and what people said about my mom, what people said about my dad, why they separated, and so on. I never really got any clear answer because the things that my dad told me were his perspective, of course, and the things my mom said were her perspective. But for me, I kind of realized, okay, whatever happened between them is between them. And I don't really think that a child should be impacted that much just because the parents weren't able to maintain their romantic relationship. Of course, that's easier said than done. But I mean, our parents are also just people at the end of the day. So I guess whoever's right or wrong doesn't really matter to me. What matters to me most is who was there for me and my brother.
Did you reconnect with your mom later on?
Yeah, I did actually. I found her. So the thing was when my parents got divorced, I think I was maybe 4 or so. And the last time I had contact with her was at the age of 10, actually, when I moved to Berlin. And then since then, I didn't have any contact with her for like more than 10 years. And then I remember that on one day, a friend of my mom actually messaged me on Facebook when I was around 21 or so. And she told me, yeah, I see you grew up so much and I still know you since you were a little baby because I'm actually a friend of your mom and so on. I don't know how she found me. It was actually crazy. Maybe it was fate. I don't know. But then I asked her and I was like, okay, do you know the name and the phone number of my mom? And then she gave me the phone number and I called my mom and I literally told her, hi, I think I'm your daughter. And then she asked me, okay, where were you born? When were you born? Do you have a brother? When was he born? And then she was, okay, yeah, I think you are my daughter. Let's meet up. And then we've had more regular contact.
And what was that first meeting like?
When I saw her, I kind of knew, logically speaking, that she was my mom, but it didn't really feel like my mom. For me, I just knew she was more like a birth giver, I guess. And she also brought her daughter, which is my stepsister. She's 10 years younger than I am. And for me, it was the feeling of, okay, I mean, she moved on, basically. I think I was emotional back then about her moving on, but I mean, of course she's going to move on and everyone has the right to move on. The things I see now, it's way, way different. I've had some healing over the last years.
And how did you achieve that healing?
I think just taking things into perspective and just understanding that everyone just carries hurt and generational trauma and whatever it is around them, and having compassion for each and everyone. Because I know that being Chinese wasn't easy. Looking at the parents' generation, the wars and everything that happened, and China being super poor back then, and then also immigrating to a different country where you don't really speak the language is also hard. I think it just takes a toll on someone. And so naturally, they grew up out of touch with their emotions. They were very hard on themselves because that's how they survived back then. And maybe that's also the way they raise their children. But of course, now our generation is way smarter when it comes to things like that. We're more compassionate. We understand more how our behavior impacts other people and so on.
Definitely. But Kex, because you mentioned that as the eldest daughter, you had to take care of everything and you were kind of like the mom in the house because you didn't have a mom. What was your relationship with your brother like?
Oh my God. Well, I have to say it was either we're besties and we love each other and protect each other as against the world, or we hated each other so much and we were fighting so much. Like, there was no in between. It was crazy because the good moments were just us both doing the dishes together and singing High School Musical, him being Zac Efron and me being Vanessa Hudgens. And the bad times were literally us fighting on the floor, being physical with each other, telling each other how much we hate each other and so on. I think it was very emotional for both of us because honestly, we were just kids and both of us didn't really understand anything. We just had way too much pressure. It would have helped to just have a grown up person being there to balance us a little bit. But I mean, it formed us, so that's good.
And without having like an adult person there, did you actually go and look for role models and inspiration actively, or did you just roll with it?
I didn't never really looked for role models actively, to be honest, because I felt like what my dad has told me about his struggles and his ways and how he came to Germany and what he's feeling, what he's going through right now, and so on. I think that inspired me enough. And also the family story of how they grew up in China when the economy was so bad and how much they have sacrificed for each others to help each others out and so on. I think these were the most inspiring stories that I've heard. That was enough for me, to be honest, that I didn't really need another role model except my family.
And what was your dad's story actually?
So my dad grew up in a family with 6 siblings in total. So, and he was the youngest. And he told me always that his parents, so my grandparents, his dad was a seaman who was steering the ship from Guangzhou to Hong Kong, basically. And he only came back home once a month. And my grandmother, so his mom, she actually raised her children by working on a rice field and donating her blood. Actually, every single time she would donate her blood, she would get a little bit of money, and then she was able to buy groceries and so on, and food for the children. And my eldest aunt, so the eldest sister of my dad, she was also the one who took care of her siblings. She didn't go to school and she didn't know how to read and write until she was a grown up person because she sacrificed her education in order to help out her parents or her mother, who was, as a single parent, basically raising 6 children at the same time. So I think that's a very inspiring story of just understanding sacrifice and understanding the love that really goes through a family. And also, the most inspiring thing for me was the fact that those were females, my grandmother working so hard and my eldest aunt working so hard. I think that was so inspiring for me because they were tough ladies.
Was that also part of what then inspired you to become so entrepreneurial and start so many little ventures? Because I also saw that you started building different things very early on, trying to sell stuff to like work your way through school and so on.
The motivation for me was always that I did not want to ask my dad for money because I know how much he has struggled and how hard he is working for money. So I didn't want to be the daughter that seems ungrateful and just asking for money. So I always started working quite early on. Majority of the jobs were, of course, illegal because I was too young to officially have a job in Germany. But I think I was lucky, or maybe that was also fate, that I was in the activities class in school, an economics activity class, basically, which is out of curriculum usually. It's always after the school day. In that economics class, we had the idea to found a company. It was a students' company, basically, with a teacher, of course, helping us out. And that company was actually a fair trade company where we were basically the distributor of fair trade chocolate and coffee. I've done that for about a year because then when I went into the next school year, I had to let that company be inherited by the next class, basically. But that's also the first touch points I've had with being an entrepreneur, having a company and believing in something. And that I think that just lit a little bit of the passion side of me that I thought, okay, I want more of that.
I see. Kex, you're known for having participated in the Apprentice One Championship edition on Netflix. What motivated you to apply to that, and what was the process actually like to become a participant?
I remember that I saw the casting call for this show that was actually based in Singapore, in Asia, while I was in Germany in lockdown during COVID. And I saw that casting call because a friend of mine who is actually a German born Vietnamese who moved to Vietnam, she posted that casting call because she applied to another show from the same production house. So to be honest, I feel like the connections there are a little bit, I don't know if it's coincidence or not, but in that moment when I saw the casting call, it was just so intuitive for me that I didn't even overthink it, to be honest. I just applied. So the application process was in that moment that I had to fill out an application form where I introduced myself personally and also from the work experience that I've had and who I am as a person, basically. And afterwards, I had to submit a video, a casting video, where I just introduced myself also again in a spoken way and tell them about my experience and why I believe I am a good fit for this competition. And afterwards, then I think I had two video interviews, one of them with the actual director, another one was with, I think, a senior person on the team. And I remember that it was quite a lengthy process, to be honest. It was probably also because of the fact that I was from Germany. So they would have to find a way how to get people into Singapore because everything was closed back then, the borders. So they had to have so much paperwork done. I think I remember I had this huge pile of paperwork I had to bring to just be able to get into Singapore back then. But yeah, the last call then was with Chatri personally, who was the CEO of One Championship, who was also the host of The Apprentice then, where he just basically told me, and I remember it was 4 a.m. in the night because it's a different time zone, of course. So I woke up at 3 a.m. in the night and I was super nervous. And then I sat in front of the webcam and then he said, "You're in." And then I started crying.
Oh.
Yeah.
And then how did it go from there? What was your experience like and what did you learn from it?
The experience was honestly extremely life changing because I knew when I was going in there, the expectation I had for myself was just to give it my best and to just prove to myself that I can go through experiences like that. Me going by myself to a different country and just jumping into a competition I haven't even heard of before. And also being able to prove myself in a group of peers that are extremely professional and that all did great things in life. And I think that was my main motivation for myself. It was more an act to prove something to myself. And just me knowing, even though I didn't win, obviously, I mean, everyone knows who has watched the show, even that, I am still so proud of myself to just know that I went through this and I had the courage to do it and that I always gave it my best and so on. And I mean, the friendships that I've had gained throughout this whole experience, they're also for life. I feel like traumatizing adventures bond people together. It's a Stockholm syndrome. But yeah, it was great. It was a super life-changing experience. My whole trajectory after the show, it just changed so much because I learned so much more about myself as well.
What did you learn about yourself as a result of it?
I think what I learned about myself the most was just that I know that when I want something, I'm able to do it, basically. It sounds cheesy always, but if you are ever in a position where you feel like, okay, I cannot do this anymore, this is my limit, there's the saying that actually there's still at least 20% more left in that moment where you realize, okay, you're at your limit. And that realization I had so many times throughout the show when I was just purely exhausted during one of those physical challenges where I was maybe hanging off from a bridge on a single rope and it was 35 degrees and I had to climb up a few meters more and I was so exhausted and my legs and my arms were shaking. I could not feel them anymore. But I just knew in that moment, okay, this is not everything I have. There's still something I can give. And I think this kind of mindset, wherever you take it into business or even into personal things or whatever, it just gives you a little bit of, I wouldn't even say confidence, but more like a very deep, deep belief in yourself and trust in yourself also.
How did your life change afterwards? Because you said that it changed your life trajectory.
The majority of change that I've realized after was actually more on the business side, which was very surprising. But of course, also it makes sense because there's a certain niche of people who would watch a show like The Apprentice because it's a business show after all. So I've had so many new LinkedIn collections, and a few of them actually also led to, substantial relationships where I built ventures with them, or like I was an entrepreneur in residence or something like that, or created investor relationships with, and also like more friendships, even mentor friendships and so on for later on. So actually that was very surprising and something that I haven't really thought of before, to be honest, how much that could have an impact for later on.
And then what did you do afterwards?
Before I applied to The Apprentice, I was working in an insurance company. So I was basically in sales, just selling insurances. One of the tougher jobs, to be honest, in Germany, because everyone hates insurances here in Germany. But I always thought to myself, yeah, I can sell insurances, I can sell everything else, I guess. That makes it tough. But then afterwards, after The Apprentice, I kind of realized, or I got reminded again what it feels like to be passionate about something and to really, really want something. And I realized that this feeling of really wanting something and to be passionate, I didn't have that while I was selling insurances, because honestly, it's just a dry job. Who would even be passionate about selling insurances? Name me one person. I don't know them. But later on, I realized, okay, if I had to invent myself new, what would I want to do? Not even thinking inside the box of what can I do? What are the skills that I have that are realistic? But literally thinking to myself, okay, what do I want to do? And I realized that was tech. So basically, after The Apprentice, I was still in lockdown and I quit the job of selling insurances. And all I did was just learning about tech, specifically about cloud technology. That is what I'm doing right now. But I just taught myself that, like, I bought courses from Udemy, I watched YouTube videos. I just took that time a little bit to, I guess, reinvent myself, because I thought that's also what I owed to myself after an experience like that, that reminded me that can literally be whoever you put your mind to, whatever you want to achieve, you can achieve. And yeah, I think that changed my whole trajectory, that I'm actually now working in tech, that I'm a tech consultant, that I'm also a tech founder now.
And what does your life look like now? Because I know that during the day you're like a tech consultant, but then after work you still work on your own startup. What are you working on right now? And also, why did you move to Bali for it?
I would not mention too much about exactly what I'm doing as a startup until this is officially launched. So basically, I am working on a startup, yes. But for me, it's the other way around, actually, because in Germany, then it would mean, yes, I'm doing my 9 to 5 until 5. And then afterwards, I would work on the startup. But now that I'm on the other side of the world, it's actually the other way around. So before I start my working day here, which starts in the afternoon, I work on my startup before, basically. And of course, I feel like everyone who has been working in tech knows about digital nomads in Bali. It's just a cliche. And I always imagine to myself, okay, just being in the jungle, in a cafe, and just my laptop and me having an intimate working sessions. And that's all you kind of need. And I think that's beautiful, because in tech, you literally do not need anything else than just your laptop and your brain. And I think that gives you so much more freedom, because I'm just not the kind of person who likes to sit in an office. I need the freedom for myself, and I need to be able to move around freely wherever I want to go to. So Bali now is the choice that I have made. It's nice here. I'm building my community here. I'm building my friends here. And I'm building my routine here. But I'm very open to go wherever life and my work or my business takes me in future.
Kex, do you think you will ever return to Germany?
Probably not to live there. That's also something that I've realized quite early on, to be honest. I always wanted to move to Asia. But ideally, knowing myself, I'm the kind of person who needs a bit of change always. So I would like to have maybe two bases, one in Europe, one in Asia, and I just move around whenever I feel like I need something new, I guess.
Yeah, welcome to the club. I also love moving all the time,
Yeah.
and actually didn't think I was ever going to return to Germany until the pandemic hit. I was just stuck at home because I'd quit my job and moved back home.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I moved to Berlin because it's the biggest and most international city in Germany.
Hmm.
Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have survived.
Not emotionally, though.
Yeah, emotionally, it's tough. I actually think that the German and the Chinese culture are very different,
Yeah.
because there are some cultures that are more similar, because over time, for example, like I told you in a different conversation before, I realized that, and after meeting like some like Spanish speaking people and so on, that the Spanish cultural values and the Chinese ones, for example, are like more similar than the German and the Chinese ones. They're just so at odds with each other that it feels difficult to combine them in one cultural identity. I feel like with some cultural identities, you can combine them and merge them somehow. But with the German and the Chinese one, I constantly feel they're like two different sides of me and that I switch between them. When I'm more like German people, then I behave more German because I know what that culture is like. And when I'm among Chinese people, I'm like more Chinese just because you cannot merge them because they're too different.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I agree totally with you. I mean, there's probably some social theory towards topics like that, why the behavior is so differently and things like that. I don't even think it's a West or East thing. I think it's more maybe like a northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere difference that you have. But yeah, I think the Spanish culture or even the Mediterranean culture in general is a lot more similar to Asian culture or to Asian values. You know, you value family more, you value your friendships more, your emotional connections with other human beings you value more. Whilst, for example, in Germany or more in the northern parts, you value more efficiency, facts, everyone being for themselves, everyone having privacy to themselves, and so on.
Yeah.
But I definitely know what you mean between switching those values always, because it can go into quite extremes, to be honest. But I think that's the nice thing of being an immigrant child, I guess, is that you have the influences of different value sets, and then you have the freedom also to maybe create your own value sets a little bit. You get inspired by international people with different backgrounds and even by other third culture kids.
Yeah.
And I think it's a nice thing. And in a few years, I think they published that once, that you don't even really have pure societies of, genetically speaking, of people who just have one pure race or one pure ethnicity anyway. So we're all going to be mixed anyways in one day.
I actually think so. I mean, more and more people who are like that. But what is actually next for you in terms of both your personal and professional life?
Next in my professional life is setting up that startup and working on that. And hopefully one day I'll be able to quit my corporate job that has, of course, taught me so many valuable skills. Of course, I'm very grateful for it. It has ups and downs, it has pros and cons, but you learned a lot of things through corporate work. But in my heart, always entrepreneur first.
And in your personal life?
In my personal life, I think I used to be the kind of person who always had everything planned out. I even had my 5-year plan, what I wanted to do in the next 5 years, what I wanted to achieve in the next 5 years. And then I kind of realized whatever happened in my life that moved me to the best new paths in my life, there were always things that I was never able to foresee. And I think that's the beauty of life also, because if you always are able to foresee everything because you're so analytical or so structured, or you want your life to be like that, it's kind of boring, to be honest. You don't leave any room for things that could be a lot better than you actually could have imagined. So I always try to have that balance between embracing whatever comes and feels right to me and the flexibility to adapt. But of course, I never want to be lost. I still know who I am and where I want to go, but I'm very flexible in the way how I go there.
I have to say, I think I also really used to be a planner in the past. I never had a 5-year plan or even a 1-year plan. I always had like specific goals, like, oh, finish uni, finish this and that. And then I would usually like focus on that and so on. But the most enjoyable parts and the most rewarding parts of my life, they usually came from unexpected events or unexpected turns. And I realized that my own preferences and goals changed so much over the time. And as I get to know myself better, that there's absolutely no use in making a plan that is too specific or having a specific plan. Because like you said, not having a plan actually leaves room for surprises, positive surprises, and that might go further than you had imagined. And by making a plan, you sometimes set a boundary and limit yourself to what you already know. But Kex, what advice would you give your younger self?
The advice I would give my younger self is honestly to embrace whatever is coming. I don't really think anything should be changed, because whatever happened led me to exactly the moment that I am at right now. Me being in Bali, talking to you here on my laptop and things like that. It's always a sum of so many small mini decisions that you do throughout your life that lead you to beautiful moments. So I think honestly, just if I would talk to my younger self, I will let her know, just keep your faith. Everything will work out fine for you. Stop stressing out.
Oh, that's so nice. And on the topic of managing your emotions and dealing with difficult situations, What would you tell your younger self there? Because obviously your childhood was actually very challenging.
If I would have been able to give her a little bit of peace of mind, then I would probably let her know that she doesn't need to figure everything out because she's way too young to have everything figured out. And honestly, no one has everything figured out anyways.
Yeah.
I'm 30 now, and obviously I have also not everything figured out, I'm embracing the unknown. So yeah, I don't think it's always good to want to know everything and to find the solution or the reason or the truth behind everything. Sometimes it's just enough to just be a child and to enjoy your childhood and just play video games and lie in the nature, whatever you want to do as a kid. Just everything will come at its right time.
Okay, Kex, thank you so much for taking part in the podcast.
Thank you for your time. It was super nice to talk to you again.
And as always, if you're a listener and enjoyed this episode, I would really appreciate it if you could take the time to rate this podcast or write a review on whatever platform you're listening on. Thank you.